All right, good afternoon, family. We are now live. We are back in full effect. We got number 404 in our Black Minds Matter series, hosted by Morgan State University's Institute for Urban Research. I am super excited about today's talk. You know, if you've been present for the last three, you know that we're going really hard in this series. We have no cut cards and we are taking no prisoners. It's very important because, you know, we're dealing with mental health awareness, and there's such a heavy stigma, especially in the Black community, when it comes to seeking out mental health services, and especially when it comes to dealing with the stigma of mental illness, right? People who are suffering and experiencing certain psychological disorders. And so what we wanted to do is to take that same message of destigmatizing mental health issues, and focus it in on the Black community, those of African descent globally. And so if you were present on the first one, we had Dr. Jules Harrell, Dr. Hope Hill, and Dr. Stacy Patton in on the conversation about how the exposure to violence, and specifically police violence via social media and the internet, has impacted our psychology. And Dr. Stacy Patton from Morgan, she actually spoke specifically to how children are impacted, and, you know, the use of children as comedy, and, you know, the posting of embarrassing and belittling moments with children. She calls it childism. She spoke specifically to that. In our second conversation, we had none other than Yasir Rahotep and none other than Supernova Islam. And they were speaking about alternative approaches to overall wellness and mental health and well-being. And so Yasir Rahotep is the founder of Yoga Skills School of Comedic Yoga. He literally developed his own method of yoga, dealing with our ancestral ways, literally the scriptures that are chiseled in stone out throughout ancient Kemet with modern day Egypt. And so, and then Supernova Islam, as many of you know, is the son of Queen Afiya, who is the wellness empress. She helped thousands and thousands of sisters, and by way, you know, and by proxy, families, to take a more holistic stance when it comes to addressing physical as well as mental health issues. Her son is Supernova Islam. He joined us on our second one as well, speaking about himself as a wellness warrior and his new book, Man, Heal Thyself. Last week, the third one, we were blessed with the presence of Dr. Timothy Owens Moore. Many of you know him as a melanin scholar. He came through and we had a great dialogue about scholarship and research, and how important it is for us to use our own voice and to put this scholarship and research in our own words, and then make it accessible, you know, to everyday people. And I always tell my students that if you're going to, you know, get in a publish or perish world or paradigm that we exist in academia, meaning that you have to publish a certain amount of literature or your job is in jeopardy, you know, make sure that it's for every submission that you send to one of these journals, these academic journals, that you also send some to Ebony, to Essence, you know, to some of our Black periodicals, so that the people in everyday life can get a certain level of exposure to that which you are proclaiming as your profession, and some of that good knowledge and wisdom and insight that you have. And so we talked about that with Dr. Moore. And we was also joined by Dr. Erica McGinnis, who is actually over there in the UK. And she has a Black Psychology boot camp coming up, which is like an 18-month series. Monthly, you're going to be blessed with the insight and practical knowledge from various scholars, various giants in the world of African and Black psychology. So she came on, and, you know, we talked about all kind of literature with her as well. And so, keeping in the same tradition of presenting powerhouses and people who are at the forefront of this mental health mission as it pertains and relates to Black folks and African people throughout the world, I bring to you this fourth one, which is dealing with Jegna and the creativity in African and Black psychology. And for those who don't know, Jegna is an African word that means, it doesn't mean the same thing as a mentor, because I'll let some of my guests today talk about the whole mentor piece, but Jegna is a more African appropriate word for having guidance, or someone who's going to guide you based on their knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, who also stands on the principles of Ayat, which is justice, reciprocity, equality, balance, and those things. And so we're going to talk about Jegna, and we're also going to talk about creativity. So both of my guests today, Dr. Afiya Mbilishaka, as well as Dr. Otis Williams, are both Howard Bisons, which is why I'm rocking my sweatshirt today, because y'all meeting three Bisons today, all at the same time. And so, you know, we're going to bring you very detailed and dynamic discussion, not only about mentorship or Jegna, as well as creativity, but how we all are working to destigmatize, how we're going to destigmatize this whole notion of mental illness. And you can be very creative when it comes down to doing this. And I do want to give a special shout out to my homegirl, Tracy Jade, and also to Raji P. Henson of the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, because that is a part of the actual mission of the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, is to destigmatize the seeking of mental health services and the discussion and addressing of mental illnesses. So I want to applaud them for doing all of their great work out there on the front lines, helping people to actually access therapeutic and psychological services for the free. You know, it ain't too many people out there doing that. So I want to big ups to you all for that. And I guess without any further ado, well, no, first of all, y'all go ahead and share this. Let your folks know that this is share the Zoom ID if you know other people that need to be involved in this conversation. If you know people who don't want to come on the Zoom, you keep your cameras off anyway, but if you don't want to come on the Zoom, they could go to Facebook, and we are streaming via the Institute for Urban Research Facebook page. We're streaming through my Facebook page, The Real Dr. Jeff Manzie, Jay Men's Facebook page, Mind on the Matter Facebook page, and just share it out there so people can get in on this conversation, because this is very, very important. Like I said, this is number 4 of 4, but we will keep dialogues going. This is just the end of the mental health awareness series. All right, so now without any further ado, I would like to welcome my sister, scholar, warrior, empress, activist on the front lines, none other than Afiya Mbilishaka. Dr. Mbilishaka is the founder and creator of PsychoHairapy. This sister is cold. She's a Howard Bison. You know, I was blessed and fortunate that I've been at Howard at the same time as my sister. I mean, she goes very hard, very knowledgeable, very, very much community oriented, and just a healing soul. My sister Afiya, how you been, sis?
I'm well. How are you, Dr. Manzie?
Doing pretty good, sis. It's good to see you. And thank you for accepting the invitation.
Yeah, I had to do a Black Minds Matter. I'm here for this.
Know what I mean? Cool, sis. So, all right, so let's just jump right in. Doc, tell us a little bit about yourself, with your background, and how you kind of got into the lane of mental health service providing.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll describe how I became a psychology major undergrad, and then how that even led to meeting you. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania undergrad. I definitely was not planning on being a psychologist. I wanted to be a dentist. But I hated all of my math and science classes. And so the second semester of my freshman year, I let my friends pick my schedule. I really had a lot of trust and faith in them, and they put me in a psychology class that I loved. Now, this class was probably about 500 students. It was a white male professor from Australia. He cursed nonstop, but it was so entertaining that I paid attention and started taking more psychology classes after that. But in the psychology classes, of course, there was no discussion of Black people unless it talked about some sort of disparity that, you know, Black men are 6 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia than other groups. But I never had a Black psychology professor or knew anything about Black psychology. So I made it my mission and purpose to address Black mental health. So I decided to apply to Howard because I felt like that would be the Blackest place to learn about psychology. And I can remember my interview day when there was this guy with locks in the hallway and a dashiki. And I'm like, yeah, this is it. And this guy, Dr. Manzie, was like, yeah, come to Howard. It's so good. You'll learn all these things. And so I can remember my interview day, even when I was still in undergrad, meeting you, and that even being a factor in how welcome I felt at Howard. So got my PhD in clinical psych. But it's interesting just to connect it to the process that I felt like that wasn't it, to end there, and continued my education through going to hair school, in terms of really thinking about authentic engagement with Black women and Black families and Black men too, but Black communities, to really be in the hair care space. So educating myself further into the talk therapy that happens in those spaces too.
Wow. And to me, that's probably one of the most profound aspects of your journey, to me anyway, is that, you know, after becoming this PhD, you know what I mean, Dr. Mbilishaka on the scene, you know, sister said, wait a minute now, let me go back in here and develop a new skill that I can now wed with, you know, all of this academic and clinical training that I have. talk to us a little bit about that bridge, because you said the talk therapy that takes place in those environments. I mean, I've been in beauty salons, but I ain't never just been there getting my hair did. So yeah, I'm not privy to what takes place in those spaces. I think I know, but bridge that gap for us though, sis, because I know a lot of people are like, how does that fit?
Yeah. Well, when we think about where people go for advice and support in Black communities, it's often the hair care setting or space, right? The Black men's barbershop is like a country club in terms of this exclusive contact with entrepreneurship, with just business in general, family dynamics, relationships, but also paralleling the salon space in terms of really that self-care experience. And just there's so many hair care settings compared to Black psychologists that it just makes sense in terms of, it's already happening. People are talking about their lives in this very narrative therapy approach. And so I'm recognizing that that's where women especially can go to heal. So
nice. And then you take it a bit further though, because you're not only dealing with the space of a beauty salon, you're also, well, you got a certification program. We'll talk about that because I want to spend enough time on that part because that's so dope. But you also look at what hair is itself and what it means to Black women. And even from a historical lens, I want to shout out our dear sister, Dr. Yelly, because when the two of you together, when y'all doing that, that hair discussion, y'all taking it back and tying it into how, TSA and like searching Black women's hair and how that relates to, the smuggling of seeds and food and potions. I mean, so you take it next level. Talk to us about the importance of Black women's hair in general, but Black women's hair, and how that helps with the mental health process.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. We have to look at the history, right? But I definitely think that hair is a sophisticated language system. It includes information about your identity, your relationship status, your health and wellness, and self-care. It speaks to employment. It speaks to career choices. It speaks to motherhood, all these different factors. But, really giving a holistic story to hair and Black women, we have to start where everything began, right? In African recognizing how hair was such a central part in ritual. And so if we define ritual like Sabon Fusome, that basically how you prepare your mind, body, and spirit to receive a blessing. And so hair was always included in the process of initiation, whether it was naming ceremonies to like girls' rites of passage programs to marriage rituals, birthing, and even death. There was always hair, whether it's some ornate hairstyle or having to get the hair shaved as a sacrifice, that hair is always included. It's the most, it's the part of our body that we can manipulate the most. Right? We can't change our facial features or skin or our weight. Yeah, we can't change our weight daily, but I put on some COVID pounds, but we can definitely change our hair. And so just to recognize that hair is the highest point in our entire bodies, right? And therefore the most connected to the divine, and recognizing that oftentimes energy can be exchanged through hair, whether it's trying to attract certain energy or cover and protect yourself from others. So just recognizing that this is built into our spirit and even our DNA. Hair literally is our DNA, right? If we're trying to solve some crime or
right.
If you use some substance, our hair will let you know what's going on inside of the body, and it's a litmus test. And so even thinking about how our Kemetic ancestors understood even how medicines could be applied through the hair. But yeah, it's so important in terms of how we relate to each other as Black people and African people.
Right. Wow. And so, when you were talking about like the initiation part and having your hair shaved, I remember in undergrad, I went to Fisk in undergrad, and I was going to pledge a fraternity. And so I was in there at the entrance meetings, and at the time I had locks, and they was just like, all right, so what you gonna do if we decide to cut your locks? And I said, I'm gonna drop line and I'm gonna whoop your arms. Needless to say, I was kicked out the meeting, but I wasn't going to just shave my head. At the time I was bona fide Rasta, and so that was just a no. I just wasn't going to shave my hair to join this organization. But then when I got initiated in the IFA, there was no question about it. And it was a dry razor shaving of my hair. And I'll never forget that moment. I mean, because it's just so much that goes into that. Before going in. and a very significant, very powerful piece. I mean, you've got biblical stories of Samson and his power laying in his hair, and I mean, it's just so much about this hair piece. And again, I just love what you and Yelly do when y'all talk about the historical piece. Now, recently, and I was going to save this to when Dr. Williams comes on later, but y'all partnered up recently, and you had a very powerful discussion with a young lady, and she became known as derogatory, the Gorilla Glue Girl. But tell me how you because I know you were watching that closely, because it's hair and it's clearly psychological distress. So tell me about your read of the situation.
Okay. Yeah, so Tessica Brown came in my inbox several times. Everyone was sending it to me, from like aunts and uncles to like students and others, to have some sort of commentary. Now, this was the top trending topic on social media for Black History Month, Tessica Brown and her experience with her hair. And so I think people were extremely critical of her, that this was a trauma that she experienced and she was being publicly shamed. Now, she even said it was a mistake. That was the whole point of her making the initial video, that she messed up, right? She was actually coming to TikTok to ask for advice on how to remove glue from her hair. Like, she said it wouldn't move, right? So it's interesting because I realized that I just passively consume these things on social media often. But I was approached by professors at Bowie State for their African psychology conference to actually speak to Tessica Brown. And so I had a lot of hesitance. I'm like, what am I supposed to say to her? Even though I do psychotherapy all the time, right? Where I'm using hair as an entry point in mental health, but I'm like, wait, you want me to do it in front of people? How would that look or work? This is confidential conversations, but like, no, just a therapeutic conversation. And so I have to say I was very cautious. Like, I don't even understand when she talks. Like, I just, my head was creating reasons to distance. But I'm like, no, this is actually what Black psychologists are supposed to be doing. Yes. That if there is this public spotlight on a Black woman experiencing some sort of trauma, we need to actually reach out to her and do some healing work. Right. So I had the opportunity to speak to her for about 45 minutes or 50 minutes one-on-one while people observed. It was supposed to almost, do you remember in grad school, those Gloria tapes?
Tapes.
Remember the Gloria tapes when Gloria, that patient, went and saw like Carl Rogers and Fritz Perls? I'm like, okay, this is like the next stage of Gloria tapes in terms of my modeling, because when you actually get to see a Black psychologist practice, right? Or do an intervention. It's something very private, but this was a public facing therapeutic conversation. And so people actually were like writing in like, what about this? And what about that? And we had the opportunity to debrief after. It was interesting because her narrative was very different than what I was expecting, but I had anticipated that we weren't getting the full story, right? That her story was more about being a Black mother and how this impacted her children, and then for it to be revealed that she was pregnant and had a series of miscarriages and wasn't trusting the medical industry because of a past miscarriage and how they treated her. So going to the emergency room each time to get these procedures done on her head was triggering like her past reproductive health issues and all these different things, so that she was actually more tearful about her health and like reproductive health than her hair. And so just getting that spotlight kind of redirected into focus on her womb rather than her hair. So it just was a really revealing conversation. And in the debrief, Dr. Bolden had asked like, what's sort of the deepest reflection? And I realized during the whole conversation, I never said Gorilla Glue, and she didn't either, because that's not who she is, right? She's not the Gorilla Glue girl. So I never said it ever. But so it was just an interesting and revealing experience for me. And I kind of want to do more of that. So, yeah.
I mean, more of that is necessary. Since when I saw that, I was like, go ahead, Afiya, because that's your lane. And, and we've got to, and what we're constantly doing is breaking that mold of what this work actually is. We're brought into this paradigm of the Western model of what psychotherapy is supposed to be. stereotypically as somebody laying on the couch and we sitting there with a clipboard as an old white man. I don't care who we are. We're sitting back as an old white man. And how does that make you feel? And what, so you said you bought the beer at 11 o'clock, right? It's just, we're supposed to be these sterile, stale, rigid, but that's not us. We're dynamic. And like you said, this happened publicly. It's just kind of like what we say in the streets. You fronted me publicly. You need to apologize publicly. Don't do that stuff behind the scenes. If you fronted me out there, you took it to the people. And one thing I heard Mama Yana Van Zant say before, she says, if it's on your mind, it's in the room. Saying that she wasn't the only person that needed to hear what you had to say. And as I'm sure a lot of sisters are struggling with hair because she was getting her hair ready to go and do something. She was making herself presentable, and she just found this way to do it. I don't know that backstory part of it, but you made a statement, said that you use hair as an entry point to the conversation about mental health and overall well-being. And that's exactly what happened. You said she started talking about her womb issues. Now, you also know about sisters' reproductive health. Talk to me about how all of that relates to mental health, mental illness, medical treatment. I mean, you see even somebody like Serena Williams will almost die, and talk to us a little bit about how women are neglected in the world of health and how all of this ties together.
Yeah. Well, you have me thinking about Queen Afiya since you were referencing her son from one of the last conversations, but I had to go through the sacred woman process just even as a Black woman / a mental health professional, because in her book, Sacred Woman, Queen Afiya references how the womb really is a center for our emotional health and wellness. That thinking about how unprotected and unsafe Black wombs are since the very contact with, Europeans, right? That's how they colonized through raping and pillaging, right? That this was a tactic of breaking someone down emotionally. To have their womb violated in that way. And so just to even think about this intergenerational cultural transmission of trauma can often be based in sex and sexuality. It just has me thinking about how we, store so much there, and just the relationship with our womb and how we relate to other people, right? So okay, you said connect hair mentally. I'm like, wait, let me just redirect myself. But just even how our hair can be, again, even a litmus test for what's going on inside of our wombs in terms of, are we eating enough iron to make sure the blood flow is well? Are we strengthening our womb? Are we doing sobadas that are like womb massages that we can actually shift our organs and these sort of things that are more maintained in indigenous cultures? I study all of that because I recognize that the body is a system, right? And so what is going on inside the womb hormonally can impact hair growth, right? I can work with someone in the salon, not know anything about them. I'm like, have you had a baby within the past 6 months, right? Because I can tell by how their hair is shedding or growing that they've had some sort of shift, right, in their womb. So yeah, I think that again, just thinking about systems within the body and how it's all connected.
Yes, and I know it's so much that we could cover. I know that's what it's about. It's like, it's like which part, like what slice of this mega cake do you want me to cut into? I feel you, sis. And that's what it is, though. We've got such a heavy, I almost say a burden. It's not a burden. We're privileged, right, to be living how we are when we are, with the ancestors that came before us, because you're talking about, they at least went through the bush with the machete and cleared a path for us, so we're walking on relatively cleared land right now, but it's still a decision that we intentionally and constantly have to make to walk this walk without apology. And, and again, I celebrate you because you're one of the sisters that's doing that. You're standing in the strong tradition of our ancestors. And I mean, I can't applaud you enough for the work that you're doing. Now, there's a lot of sisters watching, right? So talk to us like, okay, let's role play a bit, since you're bringing grad school and tapes up. Let's say you're working with a sister, and do you literally feel them relaxing, like while you're, parting the scalp or scratching dandruff, I mean, these are all traditional things. We sit on the porch in the sunshine, get our hair braided. You scratching dandruff, you know what I mean? Doing a pat, all of this other type. Do you walk us through that process as a psychotherapist now and a psychotherapist? How are you infusing healing into that sister's scalp and into her being?
Okay, great question. It's interesting because it actually starts in the consultation phase, right? When someone comes into the salon for the first time, there are certain questions, but it's interesting. A lot of Black women come in to get their hair done and have this expectation that no one else will be able to take care of it. They're like, oh, I got really thick hair. Oh, I got, like that. They almost do this qualifying statement, like, right. Are you sure you have, they'll call even and say, do you think you could handle hair like mine? And so
almost apologizing.
Yes. Oh, I didn't get to detangle. I'm like, no, you're getting your hair done. You don't have to like wash your hair before I wash it. Like there's this respectability piece that they're worried that they'll be judged and criticized based on the condition or state of their hair or their texture. And so it's interesting because that is actually where the intervention begins. Even like when you're doing a traditional consultation period for a client. I do a free consultation for my private practice all the time to make sure we're a good fit. But people are like, oh, I don't know, I'm so stressed. Can you handle that same sort of thing? And so it makes me think about what messages have Black women internalized around their beauty, or even like how deserving they are to be taken care of. So I usually do some sort of soothing, and even train stylists and barbers to do a soothing process during that first contact that can include like asking for consent. Can I touch your hair to take a look? Because I think even that sounds so simple, but even coming to the salon, the person just start digging into your head, like with like, wait. So even getting like permission, almost like, in traditional African societies, asking for like permission from an elder, like get permission first, because people aren't even used to giving consent. So getting that initial consent and actually talking through what the process is. I often ask people when I'm doing the hair, well, what are your hair goals, right? To really be clear. Oh, I'm trying to grow my hair. Oh, I just needed to get healthier. Oh, I wanted to get thicker, something, because I don't think that's part of the conversation, that sometimes it's just showing an image from Instagram to do this,
right?
To recognize what are the steps involved in creating that piece of art. Right. So I will have a lot of conversation, about sometimes the mismatch, like, we'll find a medium between that image and what you have. So to be realistic, because I don't want people to feel disappointed that, they don't have the exact look of some image when that's not the hair they have. So just going through that, even while I'm going through the washing process, the shampooing process, I'm very explicit about what products I'm using, the steps. Okay, first I'm going to put conditioner on your hair to detangle it. I'm going to make parts. Is this too tight? Like, is your head itchy any place? So it's just a lot of eliciting of details about their hair experience. And then I'll even ask, like, do you want to talk, or do you want to just have some quiet time? Because I don't want to invade like their self-care time with questions either. Right. And so it's interesting because during the shampoo process, I definitely feel like that's when people relax. There's something with water rituals.
Yes.
That people can really feel cleansed, and I'm washing their head. So, even like you were referring earlier to biblical things like washing of the feet, but washing of the head is a very intimate process. And so, this is a stranger ultimately, and I'm like bathing them within a few minutes of meeting them for the first time if they're a new client. But just going through it, I can see their body like lean back further and just let go. And touch becomes a big piece, right? That's a difference between being a talk therapist and a psychotherapist is touch. I give a mean knuckle massage. I have to say that on the scalp. Right, because we're not supposed to scratch. That could, make the scalp bleed. Even though people want you to scratch, you say, I can't, because, just hygiene. But really getting into like massaging someone, and again, like in this very sacred and sacral part of their body, that there's just an energy exchange. Sometimes I'm setting intentions for myself during that process, because I even need to be aware of what's happening to me,
Right.
in terms of touching someone in that space. Tell me
You're a
about
priestess.
yeah.
No, sis, Doc, anything that you're saying is correct. All right, please. But what I was going to say though is that you're almost a priestess of sort in that moment, because you are channeling something. As you say, like you set your own intentions. This is a very sacred ritual space, and I see you rocking your leke, so I know it's official, right? And it's like, so I think that. Well, I know that in our traditional societies, we were initiates. You didn't just go to school and pass tests and be able to teach other people to perform surgeries and do people's hair. You had to be initiated, right? And it's like that initiation, the official initiation is no longer around for these professions. We pass and test. Like I was over teaching the adjunct over at Bowie's grad program. And one of the first things I tell the students is like, look, y'all, you all are going out into this world to be counselors, to take care of people's lives. You used to have to be initiated. So see this course with me as a part of that process. You're not going to just slide through here. I'm watching to see your emotional detachment, your emotional engagement, your own biases. Talked to one group of students at an unnamed university. It wasn't Bowie, where they were third-year grad students. And I mean, you could just feel the anti-male bias in this collection of sisters. And one of them asked me, said, so how should I work with a man? I said, you shouldn't. It's like, you shouldn't. And that's just, I mean, if you think ethically, it would have been a straight violation because the bias was just that present. We're not doing our own work anymore, to heal thyself, and we're not taking our steps towards African spirituality to expand our currently limited paradigm to include a more holistic approach to life in general. Right. And I know you do that work. Again, I mean, all of this is what it is, sis. Going back to something you said earlier, consent. And I saw your presentation one time at Bowie. You led with "Don't touch my hair." Solange, talk to us about "Don't touch my hair" and what it is that Black people have to experience. Because it's not just women. When I had my locks, my wife was, "Oh, can I touch your hair?" I was like, "Yo, you're gonna touch my hair." Is it real? What do you mean? Is it real? This was like pre-men getting dreadlock extension days. So my locks was real. It's so beautiful. Can I touch your hair? Talk to us about "Don't touch my hair" and why is that so important?
Yeah. Well, just one, it's objectifying, right? I think one of the first things that European slave catchers and masters did was to start touching people's heads. Like they would either shave their hair on the boats or call their hair wool or fur, right? It's dehumanizing. And that's the part of how you can enslave and colonize someone is to other them. Right. And so it just makes me think about how this is a continuous process to see our hair as not hair and something to be curious about. I have to say, just noticing my own body right now, I feel upset the other day. I was traveling and had to go in a Walmart. I hadn't been in a Walmart in years. Anyway, the woman bagging my stuff touched my hair. I dropped something. Maybe she was like 50, 60 something year old white woman, full of wrinkles, maybe recovering. Okay, let me not go into it. But I dropped my bag. And when I bent down, both of her hands went into the hair. I stood up and I just was like in shock. That has not happened to me in years. I remember there was a coworker at Catholic who did it once, and she began apologizing profusely because I just must have looked like, and I didn't even have to say, she's like, why did I do that? And she was like talking to herself. But this woman, like, clearly had boundary issues. She did it when I was looking away, but it's funny because I was so upset. I didn't say anything. I moved behind my husband because I was with him. And we both were like, okay, we're not going to cause a scene because, we're the only Black people in this whole store. And I'm like, I should have had a comeback. I'm a psychotherapist. I should have had some statement, but I just was so in shock that I couldn't get anything out. And I remember talking to my mom later that day, and it surprised me, her response, because I was looking to be soothed. And she was like, well, your hair is so beautiful. Of course, anybody would want to touch it. But I'm like, no, you're supposed to be angry with me. She was trying to soothe me by saying I had beautiful hair.
Yeah.
But it just like, I said to my mom, it's almost like she touched my butt.
Yes.
Breast. Like my hair is an extension of my body. It is my body. And so I think that that's now the way I'm framing it, in terms of if someone, regardless of their race, but especially if it's a white person, touches your hair, it is like they are trying to stick their finger in some part of your body. Like that it is that much of a violation. And we really need to make that statement that there could be, harassment or things like that, assault, because that's my body. And so so I definitely saged my hair after I did different things. I spoke to Yelly about it. She's dragging, but like we were trying to figure out how to get this person's energy off of me. But it is a true violation.
And it's just I'm here with you in that space because I feel it, and that woman is lucky you all extended that grace, because I know King was there too, and she, to me, as you're saying, that was premeditated. Like she took advantage of you bending over to attack, is how I interpreted this. Now, I'm glad I ain't there, but I'm letting you know I hear you, right? Because open hand, and that could have been a grabbing that could have been like, she could have been setting up to do physical harm. And one thing that we do too much of, and is underestimate people like her, thinking, oh, that's just an innocent old lady, she just wanted to feel your hair. And it's like, no, them folks know their stuff too. She could have been trying to take a piece of your hair. She could have intentionally, I talked about generational curses being purposely inserted into people's lineages. She could have been cursing you, right? Because we've got this worldview and this paradigm that allows for us to understand that Harry Potter ain't just a movie, right? That there are white folks in this world that know magic, and that is one of the only ways they could have enslaved millions upon millions of African people, being the minority on the planet. And so I'm with you, sis. She could have been a witch. She could have been a Wiccan, right? She could have been on anything. And, I'm thankful for you and King having that sound sense of awareness, because y'all know, had you mopped her up like she was begging to be, if you had mopped her up like she was begging to be, y'all would have been in trouble, right? Yeah. Because I just touched her hair, and it's like, nah, no, you didn't. You touched me. Oh my God, yeah, sis, I feel you, but we got pots for that. So
yeah, well, it makes me think of people like Marie Laveau in Louisiana, who was a hairstylist who would actually invite enslaved Africans to bring follicles of their slave master or slave monster's hair, and she would work her magic. Yes. And a few weeks later, the slave monster would die. And so it just makes me think about the science behind it, and recognizing the power that goes into it, that the power that our ancestors knew very intimately. But even like the thing is happening right now. And so it definitely is a process of rediscovery of how to use that medicine or that magic.
That's right, because we know all of the so-called superstitions. You don't just let your hair just go anywhere. A bird pick up your hair, you're gonna get a headache. Those aren't superstitions, right? They say, what they call old wives' tales. Nope. Science. I call it science. You brought Sister Marie Laveau into the conversation. Make it plain for us, sis. Marie Laveau, bringing hair follicles from slave monsters. I love that, by the way. Bringing these monsters' hair to do what?
Wait, who's watching this? No, I'm joking. But
as far as you want to go, sis.
Yeah, I think I want to conclude it that she worked her magic. I'm not going to go deeper into that.
Not a problem at all, my sister. But just know, ladies, those that are watching, that this is very scientific and this is very ancient, and we know better, than what we do most of the time. And let me also say this: they also work very hard to make us forget, and that's what Dr. Mbilishaka was just talking about, is that we are returning to something. And you just got to understand this, that we are sacred. Every part of us is sacred. Every now and then we have this disruption inserted to where we are knocked in our heads. We wake up amnesiac, like Dr. Wilson would always say, we got amnesia. We are possessed, by this foreign personality, this foreign identity, these alien selves. And until you begin to correct that, we will forever be inferior acting, not necessarily inferior by nature, but inferior acting, which helps them to maintain their dominance over us. And we'll keep, acting like that was nothing when somebody reaches out and literally grabs handfuls of your hair. God, that woman is lucky. I always say this, Doc. I always say this, sis. They lucky we ain't them.
Mm.
They lucky we ain't them. Ugh. All right, Doc. So, one other thing I love about the work that you do, sis, is that you are not hoarding it and keeping it to yourself. You're actually not only out here on the front lines providing this great service, but you're also helping other people to grasp a deeper understanding of it, as well as to implement the process of psychotherapy. Talk to us a little bit about your certification program, what it entails, and how folks can jump in and get on that.
Excellent. Yes. So I developed a psychotherapy certification training program in 2019 because I was always talking about, use hair as an entry point into mental health, but I realized that it should be a global movement. So the inaugural training actually was in Havana, Cuba. So it was called the Hair, Health, and Heritage trip. And basically it was a study abroad to really understand the science and healing modality of African hair. So we went to Cuba, a group of about 10 women, stylists and community activists. And I went through the whole training process. It's a 12-hour certification process where we go in depth into the history of Black hair. We go into how to assess various mental health concerns, do interventions, how to refer people. But it's interesting because I split it up in terms of, okay, we're going to go into the mountains where, enslaved Africans escaped, and then we'll do a segment. And then, okay, now we're going to go actually get readings from very spiritual healers, and then we're going to do lessons. So it was so we're riding horses, and I didn't smoke cigars, but other people were smoking, so we made them and smoke. So just to really engage into how Cuba has done an excellent job of maintaining African culture because, the embargoes and things like that it's much more integrated. We had block parties with hip hop artists coming. We had a hair show, Cuba's first ever natural hair show with some of the stylists. Even I had a model in there demonstrating different natural hairstylists. So that was the big opening thing, but now it's online. I say that to say it's online now because there was a New Orleans trip because I had this whole Marie Laveau thing set up. It was supposed to be based at Tulane. I worked with someone there, Dr. Marva Lewis, who does a lot of interventions on training parents how to create tighter bonds with their children through the hair combing process. Especially those who have been incarcerated and returning, or housing instability and things like that, how to create home through hair. And so it got postponed, but I think we might have to do one in the fall, maybe. Okay. But basically these virtual trainings are a mix of, again, hair care professionals, but also people who just want to use hair for healing, parents or teachers, because actually educators have been one of the highest people getting certified because it's happening so much in classrooms, having to navigate hair conversations and create healing space, especially for Black girls in schools. So it's a 12-hour certification process, usually you could do 2 days of our intensive or do a self-paced online. So I've pre-recorded everything. You could just go step by step. There's a final project and various rituals of initiation to complete the process. But if folks want to go onto the website, psychotherapy.org, there are details there. You can register today to become a psychotherapist.
Wow. It's so much to unpack, sis. And I'll tell you like this, once all of this COVID lifts, you can't get back into the in-person training, or whenever that comes about when you choose to do that, please let me know and I will help to, as far as whatever is necessary to get these different pockets of sisters, certified. But I do have a question. It's not just for hairstylists, it's for barbers as well?
barbers, hairstylists, psychologists, therapists, anyone who wants to engage people through this healing modality. It's kind of like being a therapist, right? You could be a therapist and have any other career as well. These basic micro counseling skills, mental health first aid. So our last initiation, I'm calling initiation. The last one was in April. So I think it was one barber in the DMV area, because now people can be different places. One stylist in Philly. It was a grad student in sociology, getting her PhD, but she wants to study hair more scientifically. There was a social worker in LA. Like, so it was just like all these people coming together and playing off of each other, because to have a therapist and a barber in the same space and a stylist, like, people were really exchanging. So we do a lot of role play. So it was just even interesting to see how their various skill sets came out. But it's for everybody, and anybody.
Right. And especially, I would love to see a lot of parents taking advantage of this opportunity as well. Because, like, I mean, that profound piece you said earlier about, mothers re-entering, from prison into their children's lives and needing to form that bond. And you've seen that picture where it's like the generations of women doing each other's hair. And again, that is sacred, that type of bond, because it's so much. It's the touch, right? It's the nurturing, it's the concern. And it's unfortunate that so many of our sisters have this memory of being a child, and being tender-headed, or their moms being heavy-handed when doing their hair, or getting burned by that hot comb and all these different things. And so part of what you're also doing, I'm sure, is helping people to resolve those issues from early life trauma when it comes to having their hair done.
Exactly. I have a measure. I have an assessment tool for that. So something called the guided hair autobiography, where people can actually tell some of their most self-defining experiences through hair. And so definitely that comes up a lot. It resurrects a lot in these conversations. And it's, even though it's Zoom, like, people are crying on here. Like, it's a relief to have space to process things that maybe you didn't have the words for before, and find some peace of mind through hair.
Mm-hmm. Wow, sis. I mean, it's so many places we can go with this. You're currently still teaching?
Yes, I am. Well, not right now, because it's summer school and I needed a break.
I heard that, yeah. Right. Self-care. You got to do it. Okay, so if give us your website again. You said psychoharapy.com?
.org. Psychoharapy.org. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's spell it out for people.
Okay, ready? PSYCHOHAIRAPY.
Okay, so you got psycho. Here, I'll type it in there for you, sis. So it's literally PsychoHairapy.
Yes, psycho hair APY.
APY.org.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay, so if you wanted the people watching to take one thing away from our conversation, if you just had to say, all right, if somebody said, all right, I'm waving a magic wand, they can only leave with one thing, one concept, one notion, one bit of information. Yeah, I know. Because we already truncated the heck out of the conversation, because we could go some places. Matter of fact, I just got a link from Bob and Mbilishaka about 31-year-old mother adopted a 6-year-old East African, now facing charges for forcing daughter into surgery treatment. Man, we didn't even talk about the interracial adoption and how, when white parents adopt Black children and they don't know how to do their. Let's talk about that real quick, sis, before you. It's so much.
Yeah, because even I think I'm still waiting for ABPSY, Association of Black Psychologists, to come out with a statement, because I know Black social workers have. They say that there should be no transracial adoption if the parent doesn't know how to do Black hair, because then setting that child up. Like that, like they have an actual statement from years ago, maybe at least 20 years ago. I don't think ABPSY has such a statement, but I think maybe I should contact them and say, let me just put something together. Yeah. Because again, the amount of neglect that often happens, that the children's hair becomes matted and uncared for.
Right. Shame and ridicule that comes with that.
Yeah.
And so, okay, now, we got an installment coming up at the end of this summer. So we got a new leadership taking place at ABSI. And so maybe this is perfect opportunity to get that on their agenda. But so the fact that the Black Social, you talking about NABSW, National Association of Black Social Workers, have made a statement that must, and they're a mental health organization as well. That means that there are serious psychological implications of this. That for them to say, at risk, there's a major risk to put that publicly, right? To say no transracial adoption if the white parents don't know how to do Black hair. And that speaks to the psychological relevancy of Black hair. You got a child that's got matted hair, or hair ain't half dead, and it brings ridicule. Because like you said, the hair is a part of you said this at the top, the hair is a part of the identity, right? It's a part of your culture. It's a part of your self-expression. It's an extension of yourself. And especially as a Black woman or a Black girl, Black boys, because when you go to the hair you go to school with a bad fade, I remember once, and I'm about to shout my mom and my auntie out. They tried to, they cut my hair one time, and it ain't turned out too good. I remember it. I was super young. I was still in elementary school, and I remember that. They tried and they failed, but they did. But it's such an important part of our person. Sis. Okay. What you want to leave him with, Doc? What you want to leave him with? And I'm gonna bring Otis in for.
Okay.
I know.
Yeah, I just really want people to create rituals related to taking care of their hair. I think that this is a very sacred time that people oftentimes neglect themselves. And so to study your hair, understand what your hair needs, you'll better understand yourself. So I just say study your hair and take the time to actually create hair rituals.
Right. And they say that self-knowledge is the key to all knowledge, right? And studying your hair is a part of that self-knowledge. And I can't, sis, I applaud what you're doing. And again, so I'm gonna work to funnel some folks to the certification process. Heck, I might jump into it myself because my baby girl, my baby girl just
initiations. Don't act like you don't love initiations. You gotta get initiated into this too.
I love it, and I'm all for it, sis. We've just been joined by our good brother, the good doctor, Dr. Otis Williams, also at Howard Bison, HU.
That's right. I'm not wearing my HU today, but HU for life.
Yeah, you can't. We don't take our HU off.
That's right.
What are you talking about? What was you saying, Afiya?
I'll say he got Jegnaship, so that's fine too.
Hey, that covers it. Right. Wow. Dr. Williams, hey, it's good to see you, good brother. So Dr. Mbilishaka and I, we spoke briefly earlier. I was going to try to save it for the end of the conversation, but you and the African Psychology Student Association there at Bowie State University actually had Dr. Mbilishaka on board to discuss, and I'm sorry, Dr. Mbilishaka, state the sister's name again, because I don't want to refer to her by that.
Tessica Brown.
Tessica Brown, forgive me, Sister Tessica. Tessica, y'all invited Dr. Mbilishaka and Sister Tessica Brown to have a conversation. What precipitated that on the student side of the equation? Like, how were the students discussing this, and what made them say, you know what, let's get our sister that's an expert in to have this conversation publicly?
All right. Well, thanks for inviting me, and it's good to see you both, Dr. Mbilishaka, Dr. Menzise. So I would say, with the Tessica Brown incident and the national notoriety behind what had occurred, social media and so forth. So I will have to give the credit to Dr. Bowden. So for those of you who don't know Dr. Bowden, he's a co-advisor for APSA, and we're always thinking and brainstorming. And Dr. Bowden has been working with Dr. Mbilishaka for way longer than I have. And as we brainstorm and trying to think about, what can we bring to the sisters? So the theme of the last conference was focused on Black women and girls. And so we thought that, in particular, Dr. Bowden thought that this would be a wonderful opportunity to kind of bridge the two, what was going on in terms of Black women in hair, and who better to call on than the wonderful Dr. Mbilishaka. And so it just took off from there.
Great. That's what's up. Okay, I want to just overlap y'all just a bit. And I know Dr. Mbilishaka, I know you've always got something on deck. So sis, I really appreciate you accepting the invitation and coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And we're going to keep fighting that good fight. And, Go and put that name in that pot, man. I don't, that lady, that woman. All right, so really appreciate you, and I'll be in touch with you very soon. Okay.
Thank you. Peace.
All right, Doc. Take care. So yeah,
Peace,
Dr.
Doc.
Williams.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. So you are the chair of the Department of Counseling at Bowie.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you also Howard Bison, and so you're basically helping the next generation of students to become more aware of what psychology is, and not only psychology as a subject, but the practical application of it. And to me, the work that you're doing, in that department is a major effort towards a destigmatizing of this notion of mental illness. And it also helps to encourage our students to become more involved and engaged with learning more about psychological science, and the practical application thereof. Tell me a little bit about, how you got started as a psychologist and kind of like your role to get into where you are today.
Okay. So I started as I would say in high school, I wanted to be a lawyer, and it's still just this little bit of lawyer in me. But I took AP psychology in high school and kind of fell in love with psychology at that point. I actually completed my undergrad psychology degree at Bowie State.
Oh.
And I was the president of the psychology club. And at the time I had a Jegna, Baba Zach Kondo. For those of you who don't know, he's probably one of the foremost scholars or experts on Malcolm X and the assassination of Malcolm X. But he was a Jegna at the time, and I took an African Studies course at Bowie State. And so this was during the early 90s, 91, 92. And I would say from that point, that was my first, I would say, introduction in trying to merge African studies and psychology. So there wasn't an African Student Association back then. We just had the psychology clubs. And then that was the point where I was like, you know what, let's mirror this. Not mirror, but let's combine what we know about African studies and psychology, not really at the time knowing about ABPSI and some of the other national organizations. And went on to complete my master's at Johns Hopkins, came back to the DC area, again, attended Howard University, and was introduced to another Jegna, Baba, Dr. Sean Yutsi.
Yes, sir.
Who was, and he continues to show us the way in terms of being a Jegna, probably one of the most well-rounded scholars that I've ever met. And right now he's a friend and colleague at the same time, but currently he's the African Studies chair at VCU. And he's not only a chair, he's an author and all of those quote unquote traditional scholarly titles, but he's also a filmmaker. And he has produced several films, one being The Evolution of Black Psychology. And we had an opportunity to show that film a couple of years back at one of the APSA conferences. But I'm sharing this because this is kind of not only my story, but the story in terms of how APSA came into existence, right? So I would say back in the 1990s was probably for me where it all started, in terms of the idea of Black studies and psychology. And then under the tutelage of Dr. Yutsi at Howard University, he provided a blueprint, right? In terms of how we pass this on to other students. And then most recently, Dr. Mark Bowden joined the faculty in the department, who brings his own expertise, his own flavor. And it is our goal to produce more of us. No, not more of us, more refined, better examples of what we've done and what we can do.
Gotcha. Wow. Yeah. And when I saw that Dr. Bowden was joining you all over at Bowie, again, I was saluting, like, go ahead, go ahead, Doc, go ahead, Dr. Williams, go on to build the squad, man. And
we're trying to stack the team, trying to win championships.
You're doing a wonderful job, brother. And that's the thing about having these networks at HBCUs like we do. We can't beat this. And that's what I tell the students all the time. You've got, right now, you're in the midst of thousands of, where it probably goes, when you're talking about the alumni network, you're talking about the current enrolled population, you're joining a force, that has been going on, for over 100 years. And that's something to be very proud of. And it's something for those of us that are in these positions of teaching and being Jegnas, for us to keep at the forefront of our own minds too, because every time you look out into that room of students, you know that you're looking at greatness, and you just never know what they're going to be specifically in the next 10 years, and we have a major role to play in that. And so I want you to, we throwing the word Jegna around a little bit. Tell us, from your perspective, what is a Jegna?
I would say, and without using the term mentor, but is that example in terms of what we strive for. It's modeling, it's demonstrating, it's doing what you say that you're going to do in order to set that example for those that's coming behind you. And teaching, training, it's all of those things that will prepare the next generation again. And we're not trying to imitate, we're trying to make the next generation better. So it's that person, that individual who displays those characteristics.
Right. And I love how you were reframing earlier. That we're not trying to duplicate ourselves, but you're literally, like in the true fashion of education, you're trying to bring out that which is within the students already, which is a part of their whole purpose and their identity, to make them the most efficient and effective versions of themselves that could ever be. Right. And I always tell the students, man, that in these psychology programs, what we're doing is handing you all your owner's manual. Right. If you understand better who and what you are as a human being, and you understand why you are, where you are, and what time it is, we do that orientation. You orient your clients at the beginning to see how much in touch with reality they actually are. And so part of our job is a reorientation, if you will, right? And in this process, what we're doing is setting our students up to have a more stable foundation upon which to live the rest of their lives. That's really how I see our role as psychology professors and those who are practitioners of the psychological sciences. I wanted you to talk, because you said APSA, which is the African Psychology Student Association. And that, to me, the role that you play, you and Dr. Bolden, I didn't realize Dr. Bolden was the co-advisor. Now, the role that you and Dr. Bolden are playing with the APSA is the epitome of what a Jegna is. And so talk to us a little bit about the APSA, the role that it plays on campus. And I guess, segueing into how does it impact the students?
Got you. So to be more specific in terms of the establishment of the organization in our department, it started in 2010, right? Where I teach multicultural counseling, and I try to talk as much about African psychology in multicultural counseling as possible, realizing that we were really doing the students a disservice in terms of what they knew, right? So one of the questions I always ask in my multicultural counseling course is, name a prominent or famous African-centered mental health professional. And the class becomes totally silenced, right? A few students can name Kenneth Clark. Some may, say Alvin Poussaint or someone of that nature. So I knew at that point that we would be doing a huge disservice for our students to be attending an HBCU with a graduate degree in counseling psychology, mental health, whatever counseling degree you have, and not know anything, not even be able to name a person, right? Then it became just workshops outside of the classroom. And I was providing most of the workshops at the time. And then a group of students and myself decided, let's turn these workshops into a full-blown student organization. And the basis of our membership was really just the e-board and myself. And then we started to invite other speakers in. So many people don't know some of the earlier speakers we invited in was Dr. Marimba Ani. We had her, it was awesome. She did pretty much a classroom exercise. Dr. Adisa Ajamu, a few. And so those were some of the earlier starts of APSA. And over the past, let's say 11 years, over the past 7 years, we've had a conference, an annual conference, where we've invited speakers such as yourself, the wonderful sister Mbilishaka, Dr. Frances Cress Wilson. So before her transition, she had visited the campus 3 times within the 6 months leading up to her transition. And yeah, so upon her transition, we got permission from her, her family members to have an award established in her name at the APSA conference. But those were some of the earlier starts. I'm sorry. I'm
a proud recipient of that award, and I thank you all. I mean,
yes,
like real talk, man. That's one of the highest esteems I've ever received, brother. One of the highest honors I've ever received is that award.
Thank you. We appreciate it, and trust and believe that it's not something that we just give away or hand over. So it was definitely well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, anything with her name on it, brother, it's got to be taken seriously, you know. And,
absolutely.
And also, for those who don't know, Bowie State University's African Psychology Student Association is known for the quality, you know, of the physical award itself. You know, it's always of substance, of course, but the actual physical it's downstairs. Yeah, it's downstairs on the mantelpiece. Actually, I got it down on the mantelpiece above the fireplace, fam. But I mean, it's a beautiful award. You all are unapologetically honoring those that came before us, and while simultaneously developing and cultivating those that are here with us now and that are becoming after us. And, you know, there's no higher honor than to continue and maintain these legacies that we are, you know, the custodians of. And, you know, and again, I had Dr. You know, Dr. Moore, also a Howard grad, and he's down there chairing the psychology department at Clark. Can you imagine like the network that we have spread out? And if we would intentionally, you know, just set out to just start, you know, running these departments and then set up this network of HBCU psychology departments around the world, and then duplicate, you know, your APSA organization on these various campuses. And then what that turns into is an African psychology major, and then a certification course for professionals. And I mean, I'll be dreaming big, good brother. And I'm glad I got friends such as yourself, you know, that can help make these dreams a reality.
Hey, we appreciate that, brother. And so that's the movement. So some of my students may hear me, you know, mimic the BSU movement. So we have a model set up where we do plan to take over the DMV with the African Centered push for mental health. So we just got approval for an African Centered counseling course. So that's an intro course. And the advanced course will be coming out in the following semester. So the goal is to have an African-centered counseling certificate program. But we realize the impact or the influence that we have on the DMV in terms of counseling. So if you check the background of many of the school counselors in Prince George's County, many of those school counselors in Prince George's County are Bowie State grads. And even myself, when people ask, you know, do you have or do you know of a mental health professional? When you start to Google psychology today and so forth, and the DMV counselors in this area, many of these counselors are Bowie State graduates.
Wow, and it has to be, Howard has to be a close second, huh?
Well,
all right. All right, I was like, either way you slice it, we in there.
Close second.
All right, that's what's good, fam. And so how has this APSA impacted the students' thirst for knowledge? And I mean, because I've seen this, I've seen the APSA students at the conferences, and I mean, it's not just people with locks and wearing dashikis and stuff. These are everyday students on whatever part of the cultural continuum they rest on. But in their heart, they have this desire. How have you seen a shift in their desire to learn more about psychology and even be more proud about their matriculation as a student of psychology?
So we see it even in their work, right? So when you give students assignments and they get to choose their own topics, I've noticed that in my class, and I'm pretty sure in some of the other classes, like they choose topics that are related to African people. And so as much as possible, you know, we know the Eurocentric curriculum that, you know, we're forced to digest. I used to tell students this all the time, like, you're going to learn more about psychology outside of the classroom. And we're tired of saying that, right? So we're tired of having them pay for one education and then get probably the most beneficial education outside of the curriculum. And so as much as possible, we're trying to bring that African curriculum within our program as just everyday discussion. as everyday assignments, and being very purposeful in saying, like, we are preparing counselors to work with people of African descent.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And when I look at, for example, when I'm teaching students, and I teach theories of personality up at Morgan, teaching social psychology at Morgan, I've taught intro at Howard, multicultural there at Bowie. And what I know is that whenever I'm dealing with the African-centered aspect of whatever the subject is, that's when the students are like most perked up. They have this conversation going. Like, I was just teaching theory of personality at Morgan, and I had to, and the students keep telling me to stop doing this, but I always put the African-centered part of it. I introduce it at the beginning, but then we go through the standard, curriculum of personality theorists and all that stuff, and then I put the in-depth discussion of African-centered at the end. And the students always say, Doc, why do we wait to the end of the semester to talk about this stuff? This is the most important. This is the most entertaining, the most interesting part of this whole class. And I said, because if we would have started here, this would have been all we did the whole semester.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm very clear about that, brother. I'm very clear about that, because we would have kept going. And the way that I address personality theory from an African-centered perspective, of course, I'm using Baba Cambone's work. We got a common Jegna and Dr. Jewel Terrell from Howard, who's also in personality psychology. But I also look at the Orisha and the Neteru and all of the various African deities as personality types. And so when I'm talking to the students about African personality, I'm talking about Shango, I'm talking about Heru, I'm talking about Ogun, I'm talking about Obatala, I'm talking about Yemaya, I'm talking about all these different African deities, and taking it out of the the spooky, polytheistic, pagan, BS that the Western paradigm projects onto our sciences, and telling them, like, no, not only were we understanding that God is multifaceted, and manifests in infinite forms, these being some of those forms, but also, we had a personality science. And, I was fortunate enough to have participated in African-centered rituals in undergrad as well as in grad school. And so like I was at Howard, working on my PhD in clinical during the day, and I was up with the Osiris Set Society, taking the, initiation in the priesthood and going to rituals at night. And what I came to understand is that when one of the priesthood or the Shekamu was carrying one of the deities, or if I was at a Vodun ritual and they were mounted by Loa, what I understood is that was a different personality coming into play, because the sweet lady in Sheket Amsa Masood, who answered the door at my first ritual that I attended up there, she answered, "Hey, welcome, welcome." She was all sweet. And then the ritual started, them drums started, and she carried an energy called Sebek. And Sebek is a trickster. Sebek is the equivalent of Eshu or a Legba, And so she in there, she got her cigar. She's like, Sebek. I'm like, whoa, that's the same sister that answered the door. What is this? It was a whole different personality. And so that's the approach to teaching personality theory that I take when it comes to the African-centered part of it, right? And what I know is that this awakens something in our students. It gives a next level sense of pride. I would be very interested in seeing how the students who are members of the APSA fare in comparison to students who aren't members of the APSA, as far as, outcomes and desires to go forward and get advanced degrees.
Right. That's a good question. And we probably need to do more research on that. I do have a few examples of students doing excellent work beyond graduation. A former e-board member, Tiana Hines, who was always, she came to us very active. And so when she became an e-board member, she, I think, took the organization to another level because she was very community oriented. And about 2 months ago, I can't recall exactly what news channel, Channel 4, I think, did a special on her because she had this program which she called 40 for 40, but it was 40 days leading up to her 40th birthday. She did a community service event. So she was feeding the homeless. So she was very active in the community. Last summer during the Black Lives Matter protests and so forth, we had many of our members and e-board members who were protesting out in the community and so forth. As a matter of fact, we had families of victims of police brutality come to Bowie and tell their story, and we had a panelist and so forth. So we try to help our students become more engaged in the community and not just put on events, not just put on workshops and and talk about, what's going on. But we have a wonderful group of students at Bowie. I mean, we're very fortunate and lucky to be really located where where we do get so many students from the Washington, D.C. area, the Baltimore area, and so forth. And then if I can name drop just a few names of our current e-boards members, going into the fall, we have Carolyn Thorpe, Osawa Gillespie, Morgan Foose, Nala Levette, and Makides Legis. And so these students will be our e-board next semester going into the fall. And again, they, from a research assignment to a paper or just discussions in the classroom, I mean, they love talking about Black people, African people. And hopefully, like you said, hopefully they're getting it from their, faculty. So we're reinforcing this, right? Because, not all faculty would appreciate it. We're trying to make this as, part of our everyday conversation at Bowie.
Yeah, and that's important, man. So what I hear you say is that you all are creating true scholar activists. And one thing I remember, Dr. Ray Wimbush, who was my Jegna from Fisk, my professor Jegna from Fisk, and now we work together up in Morgan State. I remember my letter of recommendation he wrote for me to attend grad school at Howard. He said something about, how I manifest town and gown. That was the first time I ever heard that. It was like town and gown. I said, what is this town and gown thing? And I thought about it. It makes sense. Not only are you in academia isolated in these ivory towers, but you're also out there in the city. You're out there in community, making the connections and, lending a hand where you can and becoming involved as a true community member, not a transplant that comes in for 9 months out the year, maybe take some people's summer jobs, but you're literally, you're literally here and you're infusing yourself. And that's what it sounds like I hear you saying about, some of your students, specifically those that you named, the one sister from your e-board. And one question I do have, is what is the e-board? You've said that several times.
I'm sorry. It's just our executive board. It's our executive board / research team. So that's one thing that I regrettably have gotten away from, I would say, in the past 3 or 4 years that we plan to return and doing in the fall. So when we first started out with APSA, our e-board was actually our research team. So we would co-write, co-author with the students. We would do conference presentations with the students. Some of those typical research team things, because again, we want our students to be introduced to the literature. Like, we want them to be true scholars. We want them to go on to get their doctorate degrees. Matter of fact, one of our executive board, e-board members, she just completed her doctorate, surgeon cadet. So she's of Haitian descent. And she just completed her doctorate in counseling psychology.
Nice. And so with the APSA, I mentioned to you probably about a year and a half, 2 years now, that I would love to be able to establish an APSA at Morgan in our psychology department up there. And, so I do fully intend to follow up with you on that because, going into this new year, we're returning to campus. And I feel now more than ever, it would be most beneficial for our students, especially, like you said, the DMV, specifically in Baltimore at Morgan, to have an organization such as this, because then they have a network. They have some cousins down at Bowie, right? We got our cousins down there in the suburbs in Bowie. We up in Baltimore. We in Bmore. But I think that would be a wonderful way to connect and also to kind of garner more support, for the annual conference that you all have so lovingly put on. Because I've been to several of your conferences, not only just as a speaker, but as a presenter in a small workshop, or even just as an attendee. And it's a wonderful experience to have, especially when you I remember one year, and I still got the picture for this, and thank you for the videos footage that you sent me. It was me, Tony Browder, and Dr. Wells in there, and it's one of my favorite pictures that I have is me, Tony, and Dr. Wells. And, we both flanking her. We're on either side of her. And it's just it's a wonderful opportunity that you've provided for students to engage some of these top scholars. Like you said, Mama Marimba, doing a classroom workshop, they would never, ever forget that.
Right.
And I think that that's a part of what our task is as Jegna, is to provide these experiences for our students that they otherwise would not have had.
Absolutely. And, the students, are the ones who organize these conferences, right? So these are, and I don't mean to, boast or whatever, but they are nice conferences, and the students are organizers from conceptualizing the theme behind the event to also contacting speakers in some instances, to food menu selection. At every aspect of the conference, students are organizing and leading, and even the day of the conference. So they don't get paid for any of this. So no one is doing this for monetary, compensation, fame, or anything like that. This is what they love to do, and they do a wonderful job at doing it. And no,
my bad, bro.
No, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to say that the conference also has gotten so big, even with the virtual conference this past year, that we get emails, contact from people. I got an email from a sister down in South Carolina who wanted to attend the conference. So we're kind of branching out and bringing in more attendees, not just from the DMV area.
Man, and see, what that reminds me of is the opportunity that I had at Fisk. I worked with the Race Relations Institute, and I was a part of the annual conference committee where we planned the conferences, planned transportation, speakers, budgeting. And at the time, it was just fun. At the time, it was just an opportunity to be on the front lines of all this learning and getting to rub shoulders with these giants and, just host this thing on campus. But, as I've gone into adulthood and I'm looking back on it, it actually developed skills, right? Yep. It was, because it takes a lot to convene a conference. And so you're simultaneously exposing them to this vast wealth of information and knowledge and experience, but you're also helping to train them in their convening skills, the ability to administer, many aspects of a large and major event. And so that's one of the other seeds that's being planted. And I don't know if they realize it now, but you're gonna be able to sit back one day, you're gonna flip your beard like old Kung Fu master as you see them putting on global conferences, and you're gonna know where they got their start.
Right. Even in terms of, Dr. Chris Wilson, in many situations needed transportation back and forth to Bowie. So we had at the time, he was our first APSA president, Tyrone Morton. Mm-hmm. And so he would transport her back and forth to Bowie from her home and so forth. But so he talked about the wonderful conversations. I'm sorry, me turn this.
Okay, yeah. And that's super fly though, because that's how I got my start. And that's actually how I met Dr. Wells. And when I was at Fisk at the Race Relations Institute. And so Dr. Wimbush, I was the director of transportation. I think I might've gave myself that title. I think I did that, but he would always throw me the keys. Like when he started off with this little green Benz, he would throw me the keys and say, hey, I need you to go pick up John Hope Franklin from the airport. Or he'd throw me the keys to, I think it was a Forerunner at one point in time. Like, I need you to go pick up James Earl Jones I need you to go pick up Dr. Wells and whoever it was. And I was just the one that was, like you said, I would pick them up. And I remember one day I was driving this van and I looked up in my rear view. I had Harry Allen, Public Enemy, I had Dr. Wells, and I had Mr. Fuller in there. I had James Earl Jones in there, and I had Max Roach in there.
Wow.
And I was tripping. I was like, matter of fact, and Chuck D, and that was just what I did, man. I was the one, like Max Roach was in town, and I gave myself a, hey, young blood, Matt Draz drummer, hey, blood, I need to go I want to go to the mall or something. Yeah, so I'm driving to pick up Max Roach and take him to a mall. Dr. Van Sertima in town. I'm picking him up from the airport, taking him to his hotel. We going to eat. I took him around to the little hole in the wall, Juju Shop, Mr. T, African boutique. And I'll never forget, but me and Dr. Van Sertima was in this little boutique. And he said, oh, this reminds me of one oasis in the desert, because he's talking about, and it was like Mr. T's boutique was very small, but, he had everything. He had High John the Conqueror in there. He had, the little bones. He had any type of juju magic that you needed in this shop.
Right.
And wow. It's such an important role and opportunity that you're providing to your students, man. And I'm a product of that, and so, and that's, I'm speaking to you. I know, man, but I'm speaking to you as, a student that went through such Jegna, under such a Jegna such as yourself. And it's just, I mean, it's one of my elders in Nashville, Dr. Boyce Brunson, son of Mama Brunson, Queen Mother Brunson. He says, you can count the number of seeds in the apple, but you can never count the number of apples in the seed. right? And these are the seeds that are planted by true Jegnas, right? You know, you drop these seeds and you just never know how many more apples are going to be produced from when that seed matures, man.
Right.
And it's this X factor that we have at our HBCUs, brother.
Right. You know, and if I can talk a little bit more about Dr. UC, right? So at Howard, and so, you know, even for me, right? So when I was at Howard, I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, probably around that age.
You look like you're in your mid 20s now. What are you talking about?
Go ahead. But no, Dr. UC, man, I mean, he just exemplified, you know, manhood. So I'm watching, you know, and you never know who's watching you, right? So I'm watching how he conducts himself, you know, not just as a scholar, but as a man, right? And as a father. And at HBCUs, you know, we invite students to the homes, right? So being able to go to someone's home, you know, for a cookout. And we had, you know, weekend research teams. So on the weekends, you know, we were up at Howard, and it wasn't like for an hour or two, right? We had to spend the day up there. And so, you know, he would feed us, right? So it was, I mean, those small things that we take for granted in terms of this was someone who treated us like, you know, we were his son, or we had sisters on the team too, like, you know, your daughter. And today to see that he hasn't slowed up, right? So you would think that, you know, he's a full professor, like, okay, I don't have to do as much work. And so he just took his game to another level where he has produced, you know, several films. He's a coach, right? He's a football coach out in the community. And so I still look at the work that he does and continue to, you know, want to be motivated and inspired, you know, by his Jegna work.
And Dr. Utsi, he was the editor of the Journal of Black Psychology at one point, right?
Right.
And one of his films is actually the history of the Association of Black Psychologists, right?
Yes. Man, so one of his, when he was at Howard, he was the editor-in-chief. His most recent film is the history of Black psychology. He has a documentary on the burial grounds in Richmond. He has another documentary, Body Snatchers, where how medical schools would dig up burial grounds to use cadavers as African bodies, I should specify, for their training. So he has, When the Well Runs Dry is the title of that document. When the Well Runs Dry? Yes.
Okay, we have to look that one up. And, you know, speaking of burial grounds, just read recently where there are some museums and medical schools that had dug up the body of the MOVE organization children up in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And was, using them for research and things of that nature. And, you know, Dr. Mbilishaka, now we kind of touched on it, and this is within the purview of the African worldview, is that, you know, some of this stuff isn't just ignorance or a lack of consideration. Right. My understanding is some of it is a wicked intent. And the same way I view them digging up the bodies over in ancient Kemet of royalty. Right. You know, this is to, you know, they ground them up into a spice, mamia, you know, and so it's just like, when you look at this stuff, to me, it's very intentional and it's ritualistic at times, meaning that they're doing it to siphon off of the energy of the life force of the people who they have not only murdered in some cases, right, you know, but who they continue to torture even post-death. And so absolutely, it's the one thing about, you know, African psychology and you having a student organization based on that is that they get this opportunity to expand their worldview, their paradigm, and their understanding of reality. Because if we remain limited and locked into this Western paradigm, people would think that whatever's on this screen in front of us right now is the totality of reality. Right.
And you know what else, Dr. Jeff, in terms of our students, is we have tried to establish, I wouldn't say try, we've probably done better than tried, establishing a pipeline with our undergrad students. So, you know, we have your good friend, Mama Louis Jack, you know, who teaches in our psychology undergrad program. So we've had her speak at an APSA event, and she's been very helpful in helping us recruit students in the undergrad program to come through to our graduate program. but we had our e-board actually mentor some of her students, right? So they would go out and go to their classrooms and make announcements and build relationships with our undergrad students. So although we're Jegnas, we're teaching, again, our students how to be Jegnas, even as they're receiving this training and so forth. Right. So as far as we can reach back, we're going to do it.
And you mentioned that force to be reckoned with, Dr. Omitha Lewis Jack.
Yes.
I mean, that she's like a quiet storm if there ever was one.
Yes.
So gentle, so beautiful. She was my professor at Howard, she's also, if I'm not mistaken, a graduate of Howard as well. But she taught me at Howard, and she was like what Van Sertima said, she was that oasis in the desert where, she had that gentle soul. She was Trinidadian, so she was always lively, and she really helped me to get through a lot of that program because she understood my African-centered leanings, probably better than anybody else in there, in the program, as far as my professors and my classmates were concerned. And she was that one who could give me that reaffirming look, she also strong enough though to be that mother, like, okay now, boy,
right.
Boy, you better slow down now. I'm like, all right, doc, you know me though, but I will,
Right.
And I, it's guidance like that and connections like that are invaluable later in life, especially when you can maintain them. She actually invited me to teach in the undergrad program, that abnormal psychology course. And I find that many of our students are very much interested in abnormal psychology. And what I find is that they're always trying to either evaluate themselves or their significant other.
Exactly.
So wait a minute, Doc. So you saying that if he do this, I ain't said nothing about he. You ain't heard me say nothing about he.
Exactly.
But and being able to see that though from an African-centered lens, I think was very much empowering, because I have to present that. That's the lens through which I see everything. And so even when I'm talking about abnormal, again, we run the gamut of the regular, the standard curriculum, but I help them to see it through the lens as well. Like it's not an either this or that most times, It's on the continuum of an and both somehow or another. And one of the things that I loved about when teaching multicultural in the textbook that we used is that there were examples. For example, it's an example about somebody, I can't remember if he's in Vietnam or the Philippines, from somewhere. There was an Asian guy in an example, and he came to the United States and he was seeing spirits. So they were calling him a delusional and saying he was hallucinating. And the only thing that could cure him was a priest from his hometown of his own religious and spiritual orientation. And I love that part because it helped to understand that, his Western worldview is probably the most limiting and the smallest on the planet. And that by him being able to contact the local priest from his village or his hometown and have the rituals and ceremonies applied, it literally healed him. And was able to translate that story over into abnormal psychology. Because, like Dr. Mbilishaka said earlier, the disproportionate diagnosis of things like schizophrenia, we're talking about hallucinations and delusions. It helps us to understand that more people on this planet than not understand that there is a non-physical reality that coexists with us. And that sometimes you can interact with somebody who we consider to be deceased. If you got a client that says they smelled their grandfather's cigar the other day, we don't say that, oh, that was just a yearning, a longing, it was a olfactory delusion. No, or olfactory hallucination. No, the ancestor may be there. And so what I'm gonna tell that person is, do you have a picture of your grandfather? Put that picture up. If you know the type of cigars that he smoked, maybe break some of that tobacco up and, maybe light one for him or do those things to honor that, because he may in fact, be trying to communicate, and that's a difference, right? That's a difference.
Yep. Our students love those conversations. So whenever we're having those indigenous conversations, not just in class, but when speakers come and we have presentations of that nature, I think that's something that that they feel, when they're in class and they're learning about some of these European scholars or therapists and so forth. I think it's still external to them. But when they have these discussions, it's actually, I think inside, it brings out something, a connection, something that they resonate with, and something that they want to learn and hear more of. On another note, so we do have a required text in our when you was mentioning abnormal psychology. In my multicultural course, I required they read the protest psychosis. So that's subtitled How Schizophrenia Became a Black Disease.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What's it called again?
The protest psychosis, How Schizophrenia Became a Black Disease. Yeah. And so the author just talks about how in the early 1920s, how schizophrenia was a predominantly a middle-class white female disease. And the characteristics were pretty much docile, obedient. These were women who did not clean the house, and the husband wanted a divorce, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. And then over the decades, how in the 1950s, it became a Black disease to discredit those in the Black Power movement. So forth. Yeah, it's a wonderful book.
And two things on that. One, it reminds me of the because when I show in legal and ethical issues, one of the first films I show in that course is The Lobotomist, where it talks about, that guy who was the wealthiest physician in the world, going around giving lobotomies. Well, the health wealthiest men. He walked around with his little medical bag with ice picks in it. And it reminds me because, he was often called in for disobedient wives as well, and he would, husband would call and say, my wife is not performing properly. He'd come in with his ice picks and, tap through the orbital socket and get the disconnecting, brain matter. But then they took that same and they went into prisons and they went into these other institutions and started preying upon institutionalized people, who are some of the most vulnerable populations, and many of which was us in them, perform these same tasks. I'm definitely going to grab that book. You said The Protest Psychosis.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got to get me a copy of that. I'm gonna order it in a minute. I'm trying not to do it while we're talking. That's one of my knee-jerk reactions is where I hear about a book and I order it almost immediately and jump right in, man. And I think that our students benefit greatly from having such learned and well-read professors in Jegna. I was on here last week with T. Owens Moore, and the whole thing was about scholarship, and it was an unspoken thing, but I pick up a book and I would show a book, and just when I just happen to have my desk right now, brother Baruthi, Common Sense Security, man.
I just got that too.
You see what I'm saying?
I just got it.
And that's what T. Owens Moore, Dr. Moore and I were doing. I would pick up a book, hold on, it'd be right there in reach. And he'd be like, and so it was like an unspoken type of dance that we were doing. And our students, I think to be able to, one of my students said this past semester, matter of fact, like, man, Doc, you got something for everything. You got a story for everything. And it's like, how old are you? It's like, you can't be old enough to have had this many lives. And I'm just like, it's kind of like we learn to time travel and we become more efficient by embracing our African selves,
Absolutely. Yeah, when I tell students my stories, when I was at this job, when I was at that job, they like, how is it possible for you? And you've been at Bowie for what, 15 years? Like how, never had one job, only one job, always had multiple jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another point of connection that you and I have is Progressive Life Center, right?
Right.
Me, you, and Dr. Bolden, we were all there. And, it would be remiss of me to not mention one of our mutual supervisors and Dr. Carl Hampton.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Hampton, man, I always tell that brother, like, Doc was probably single-handedly responsible for more, supervising more mental health service providers in the DMV than anybody else. I mean, that brother's got such a serious network in us as his supervisees, I love that brother to life, man. One real quick Dr. Hampton story. He had turned in my grade for supervision one semester when I was at Howard. And he says, I showed up for supervision. He like the Dr. Hampton, just like Dr. Hopkins, who's on faculty over at Howard, they like to kind of push a button to see how you're going to react. I learned that quickly. And so I came into supervision one day with Dr. Hampton, man, and he said, did you see your grades? I said, yeah, I saw my grades. He said, did you see that B you got? I said, yeah, I saw that B. You know why you got that, don't you? And, by this point, man, I was just kind of like, man, Doc, if you don't leave me alone. I said, yeah, I got that B because you gave it to me. I was being a smart ass, but I love Dr. Hampton, man. He's and Dr. Garrett over there, and the whole Progressive Life family, brother.
Right,
It was, you talk about Jegna. They taught me so much over there, brother.
Right.
I mean, I risked not graduating because I refused to do my clinical training anywhere but there.
Wow. Dr. Hampton is he definitely pushed your buttons. I remember he would ask me questions that I thought I knew, and I thought that he knew that I knew. But the most common, like we both know, like this is a common sense answer. He would ask that question, and I would really stutter over asking or answering the question. And basically, he was saying, you really don't know unless you're able to articulate, how you know this. And so he was just challenging, just all the time, challenging what we thought we knew. And, helping me, I guess, if it was something that he, maybe a weakness or limitation that he probably saw or whatever, but he wanted to bring that out in terms of being able to express myself and not taking, knowledge or content for granted, but being able to, if you in a debate or discussion or whatever, being able to get your point across.
Right. Articulated in some way or another.
Right.
Yeah, that brother, man, I'm sending the prayer out for Dr. Hampton. I know he's in recovery mode, man. And he's just a giant, he's just a giant. I would say soft-spoken. He ain't soft-spoken by no means, but but he's pretty low key, as far as the grand scheme of things, because he should be held in as high esteem as some of the scholars that we call out their names, right?
Right.
But he doesn't require books. Yeah, he doesn't have the books out there.
And I was gonna say he doesn't require a whole lot of celebration. So he does what he does and keep it moving. And he's someone, even after all these years, he's someone who comes back to the APSA conference. And just wanting to be around the students and wanting to see the work being done.
I think that he was actually Adisa's supervisor as well. He supervised, me, you, Mark, Adisa. It's just
Satira Streeter.
Yeah, right. Dr. Streeter as well. Yeah, man. It's just like again, he's that's what I'm talking about when we talk about Jegna. He's put in a very pivotal place to impact, if we were in a village, in a true village where we were all still in the same region, and he would definitely be one of our village elders that should be able to, at the snap of fingers, mobilize all of us. Right. To a common goal. I mean, I love the brother to life, man. I just can't say enough about Dr. Hampton, man.
Absolutely.
So going forward, Dr. Williams, I like to call you O. I don't know if you noticed, I've been calling you O.
Appreciate it.
But Dr. Williams, man, not only are you a chair, a scholar, a faculty advisor for a student organization, but you're also a family man and a father. Raising children these days cannot be the easiest thing. I'm raising children myself. We had a brief conversation about that. So talking to the people that are listening, because we're talking about destigmatizing as well as being a Jegna. What do you think is one of the most important things that we can do in our everyday life to help to encourage people to seek out mental health services, to become more aware of their mental health status, and to to don't shame other people who are suffering?
I would say, so for even my students would know that family is, for me, first and foremost. I've never told anybody this, but just to give an example of how important family is for me, I had a student a few years back who had a group presentation that day in class, but his son had a very important football game that same day in class. And I told him he better not miss his son's football game. But we worked out in the end. But yeah, family is definitely most important to me. And again, being able to model what I want my children to be, and my wife as well, right? So when they see us, when they see the unified force up front, that's giving them an example of what a couple should be and what a family should look like. In mental health, and on the topic of mental health, it doesn't escape any of us, right? So the first line of mental health is self-care. So for our students, for our soon-to-be counselors and scholars and so forth, we must take care of ourselves. We must practice self-care and understanding that you can't help anyone unless you help yourself first. In terms of the stigma that's surrounding mental health, I think it's a very thin line in terms of the stigma, because for African descent people, what's often thrown in our face in terms of what's mental health or what's mental illness and so forth, as we stated earlier, for many of us, it's hard to connect with that. And so when we start talking mental health from an African-centered perspective, which many of our people do not get, then they can see, okay, yes, I am experiencing this, or this is affecting me in this kind of way, or the form of treatment may not come in the form of, let's say, tons of psychotropic medications and so forth. So I think when we start to, as professionals, shift this discussion in terms of African psychology as being an everyday practice or an everyday phenomenon, and at some point we can drop the African in front of, psychology and mental health and so forth, then at that point, I think the stigma would soon dissipate. But I think much of the stigma is coming from the implicit understanding that Eurocentric psychology is not for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll often say that in that multicultural counseling course, if this is multicultural counseling, then what is counseling then?
What is counseling, right?
Yeah, right. It's like, what we got to put that label in front of this. That should make you question, then what is that over there? If this is where we talk about the others, then who are we talking about over there, right? It's a very important question and a very important point to ponder for our students, because we're so inundated with, this thing called normalcy, that we rarely question what is this thing called normalcy and who is this norm based on, right?
Right.
In my conversation with Dr. Hill, at the first conversation in this series, she made me aware that the National Institute of Mental Health no longer sees the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders as a reliable instrument or a tool to use for diagnosing. I had no idea that they made that shift. It wasn't announced so loudly.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah.
It has serious implications.
Now, I tell my students that as long as we have a multicultural counseling, that this still needs to be worked. Like the mere existence of this course suggests that we are not where we need to be, and not because this course is doing what it's supposed to do, but because that we know that outside of this course, really even sometimes inside the course, but outside of the course, we have a colonization of the curriculum. And the multicultural curriculum is colonized, as you know. Even still.
Yeah, it's like the fact that it's even necessary lets us know.
Right.
And then, you got everybody now that we open a multicultural, now it's like everybody's now jockeying to be the culture to be emphasized the most.
Right.
It's kind of, I think it was Talib Kweli had that lyric. He says at the bottom of a ship, saying who's got the fly, arguing over who's got the flyest chains, right?
Right.
And it's just like we got so much more work to do. And I'm hopeful, just being in the classroom this consistently and this regularly, seeing that, and we do have some shining stars coming up. We do have people who are willing to unapologetically adhere to a worldview that's not the quote unquote mainstream. We've got students who, for example, when I was teaching personality theories a couple of years back, and I talked about Jung, and I talked about Carl Jung and his work in Africa, his studying in Africa. And I showed the pictures of Sigmund Freud in his office with all the African statues. I was able to introduce, the divination process, because Carl Jung wrote the foreword, to a divination manual called the I Ching, and it comes from the East, from China. And the students, they were like, of course, wide open and fascinated by it. And I was like, all right, so y'all want me to demonstrate an I Ching reading? Because I was trained in the I Ching when I was doing my degree at Howard with him. And it's like, yeah, so all right, give me 3 pennies. And, one of the students dug 3 pennies out of her bag and gave me the 3 pennies. And So what question we want to ask? It's like we talking about Jung. Let's ask a question about Carl Jung, because he talks about how he didn't go to Africa until the readings came out correct for him. So he was anticipating visiting the continent of Africa, but delayed his trip a couple of times because every time he cast the I Ching and did an oracle reading, it never came back favorable for him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty deep, man. And you can, that's in his book, Jung in Africa. You'll find that in the beginning of Jung in Africa. Yeah. Okay. And then what you find in his forward in the I Ching, though, and the version of the I Ching is Wilhelm's version of the I Ching. Carl Jung writes the forward to that. And in the forward it is, he actually does a reading asking the I Ching about publishing the I Ching in English for the rest of the world to embrace it. And so he did a reading about the work that they were currently doing, asking the I Ching about itself and how it feels about being introduced to the rest of the world, right? Wow. And so very phenomenal. And so I said, all right, so let's ask a question about Carl Jung. How about this? Should Carl Jung go to Africa? Because military, he stay out of Africa, colonizer. And so I did the reading, and I don't remember the number of the hexagram right now, but the symbol that came back was called the Wanderer. And the Wanderer, and the story that's written about under the Wanderer, whenever you get this symbol, it talks about a stranger traveling in foreign lands. And you can't make this stuff up. And so one student, she was I think she was Ghanaian or Nigerian. Her mind was blown. She packed up her stuff and she left. She came back the next class, of course. but it was an opportunity, you know what I mean, to just kind of expose them to even how these people that are held in high esteem in the Western paradigm actually honored the non-Western perspective of reality. And for many of them, that's actually how they got to be celebrated in their field, like Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, or the way Brother Laila used to call him a sick man Freud, and how all these so-called giants, actually are standing on the shoulder of our ancestors. Right. And so it would be in our best interest to not necessarily remove the middleman, but to study what they studied in order so that we can awaken our own indigenous and internal greatness as we move forward in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow.
And Dr. Williams, as we begin to wrap, what would you say to people that are watching and wondering about, their ability to be a Jegna, or their ability to, provide guidance and help shape and mold the next generation? What do you think is the most important thing for them to embrace in order to be successful with that?
Well, I would say that it's our duty to serve in that Jegna role. I don't think that any of us have gotten to, if we're anywhere noteworthy, we didn't get to that position or that space without help or without something that inspires us. So I see, and I keep using that term inspires, because I think that a Jegna is someone, as you also touched on, it brings out the best in that person. So hopefully, the one thing I would say is to be authentic, be genuine, and make sure that you continue to strive to be the best that you can be. And I think in return, you serve as an agent to help others be the best that they can be.
Right on, man. And I always say that we've got two different examples of what, we got two different examples in the world, examples of what to do and examples of what not to do.
Right.
And just recognizing that we've always got these influences around us and these influencers around us. It's just so important, to pay homage to those, who are helping us along the way, while they're still here. Right. We've got plenty of Jegna, whether they call them Jegna or not, within our own families, within our own communities. Right. It could be that school teacher on the elementary level. It could be the neighbor. It could be a father, a stepfather, a mother, a stepmother, cousins, sisters, uncles, aunties. We've got all these opportunities to learn and be guided by and inspired by those that are around us. And I personally feel, brother, that we're being, especially our next generations, are being bombarded with these images of negative guidance, negative influence, to make them feel that, they're living, just living a healthy lifestyle is somehow not cool, right? Having a strong sense of identity is not cool. And I was looking at this just the other day, like, it's crazy that we have the sickest amongst us being used to promote, what's popular and what our children will want to gravitate for, right?
Yeah.
And Dr. Wilson says, in order to survive in this world, you would have to be insane. You would have to be out of your mind, to not have psychological distress in this setting. Yep. And one more quick point, I was watching a video by Supernova Islam, who was a guest 2 weeks ago. And he was talking about being a warrior, being raised by Queen Afiya, born vegan, conceived vegan, born vegan, raised vegan. And he said he would go to school and his lunch would be a sprout sandwich, right? And he said he would have to fight, because he was different. His lunch was different. He said his snacks, other kids pulling out, Skittles, Starburst, M&Ms, all this like junk. It ain't junk food, all this junk. And for their snacks, he said he bring it out like organic apples sliced, dipping them in peanut butter. He said he had to fight, because he was different. And he said that kind of trained him to be the warrior that he's grown up to be, because he was always having to fight and defend his own identity. And I commend him for standing strong in that, because not all of our children are able to do that.
Right.
And what you and I understand is that it's an intentional movement to force us to embrace the negative aspects of ourselves and to embrace those things that would actually weaken us. So that way we would have to continue to function inferior in the face of an attempted maintenance of supremacy.
Yep, absolutely. It's all around us, especially in this age of social media today. I was reading something on social media. It's with social media, it has the world being depressed about other people's, what they have, lifestyle and so forth and so on, that don't even exist. So we grow depressed over things that is not even real.
Not even real. You seen that documentary, Fake Famous?
I didn't. I need to get that too.
Man, check out Fake Famous, man.
Fake Famous.
It's the story about what you're talking about, how influencers are created. People are buying followers, and it shows how they might be like sitting like in the alley, literally. And and all around them is you're smelling like urine and stuff, but they'll take a picture of themselves and make it seem like they like over in the alley in Italy or something.
Oh wow.
And just really just promoting all of this. And when it's matched with the endorphin signals that are purposely being triggered, when people get likes and followers and feedback, when you start to put all this together, it has to be an intentional psychological move, to entrap people emotionally and to wed people to this stuff, and constantly checking it, constantly looking for this, constantly feeling a sense of validation or invalidation based on the responses that they're getting. And I think that the more real life experiences they can have with people such as yourself, as a Jegna, as a professor, as a guide, that the more likely our next generation will be able to read these subtle and insidious attempts at their life, for what they really are, and kind of unplug, even if not totally, but at least to a degree to where they can at least survive.
Right. Yeah, totally agree.
You got some closing words for the people, good doctor?
I would like to thank you again, Brother Menzise. You have always, whenever, from being an adjunct at Bowie State to coming to the APSA conference, doing workshops and so forth, you continue to do the work, and we would definitely collaborate once we get that Morgan State project off the ground.
Yes, sir.
And for your listening audience, Bowie State, if anyone looking for a graduate program, Department of Counseling, we have school counseling, mental health counseling, counseling psychology, and school psychology. So if you want to be a part of the movement, come join us.
Man, and I promote the program all the time. I'm like, look, y'all, get up in there, go and get your master's in counseling, and go and get your LPC, and get out here and let's do this good work. I love you to life, good brother. I really appreciate you. Thanks for accepting the invitation, and I'll be talking to you really soon, fam. Thanks, bro. Appreciate you. All right, take care, man. Peace. All right, y'all. So we are finishing up number 4 of 4 in this Mental Health Awareness Month series, Black Minds Matters. Hopefully you all have been thoroughly not only entertained, but edutained. You received insight and information that you can take back and, dig deeper into. You've been inspired. I hope that, at some point, we will definitely pick this back up and continue to have more conversations and dialogues with people who I personally feel have a lot to share. I want to thank you all again. I want to thank Morgan State University, President Dr. David Wilson, the Director of the Institute for Urban Research, Dr. Raymond A. Wimbush, all of my colleagues at the Institute for Urban Research, definitely for all of you for checking in and paying attention and taking notes and doing all the follow-up. We really appreciate it. We really value your participation and your input. I will see you all very soon, and this will be posted on the YouTube channel Mind on the Matter. It will also be on all of the Facebook pages, J Menz, JayMenz, The Real Dr. Jeff Manzie, the Institute for Urban Research's page, as well as Mind on the Matters page. So you can find a replay on all of those different pages. Please continue to share. Look forward to hearing from you all. You can email me at JEFFERY Menzie, MENZISE at Morgan.edu. Let me know some of the future talk that you would like to see, and even some future guests if you have any recommendations. All right, so be well and take care. And I look forward to talking to you all again real soon.